Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Michelle Paver, and we're going out live on Facebook. And in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about writing ghost stories. I'm also going to mention two of my own personal favourites, just in case you might enjoy them. And then we'll have loads of time for me to tackle all your questions. And you've sent in a bumper crop this time. In fact, so many that I won't get through them all, but we're going to have a special add-on broadcast in a couple of weeks to finish them off. But before we begin, just a couple of things. I just want to remind you that if you want to ask a question, it's really easy. All you need to do is go on my website, michellepaver.com, and click on Ask, and there it is, so you can see it. And also, as quite a lot of you already know, the Thin Air paperback is published in a month's time, on the 5th of October to be precise. And there's the rather gorgeous new cover. Many thanks for all of you who tweeted and sent in comments, all of them positive, which was very nice. I love it too. I think it's a gorgeous cover. And to celebrate the publication of the paperback, we've got a rather nice competition. I think many of you will remember our Thin Air prank video, 6 million hits and counting. Well, now's your chance to remix it if you have the technical expertise, which I certainly do not, but I know lots of you do. And there are some fabulous prizes, details on my website. But yes, the idea is to remix the prank video in any way you wish and then broadcast it all over the internet. So as I say, details on my website, michellepaver.com. So there we are. That's the preliminaries out of the way. Now, with the nights just beginning to draw in, let's turn to things ghostly. How does one write a ghost story? What are the elements? Well, as you can imagine, since I've written two of them, two full-length ones, I've spent some time thinking about this. And I have found that ghost stories are, in my experience, completely different to write from most other books, or at least they're harder. I say they're different in the sense that when I was writing Dark Matter, my first ghost story, and also Thin Air, I really felt I had to go back to basics and take a look at my favourite ghost stories, reread them, and try to see what it was that made them succeed. And sometimes I also looked at really clunky ghost stories to see, well, what are they doing wrong? And I did manage to extract some principles which I'm going to share with you because they helped me. And that might sound a sort of mechanical way of doing things, but it's analytical, and it's quite a useful way when you're writing a ghost story. So the first thing I thought about is the ghost, not surprisingly. You need to know who your ghost is or was when it was alive. And you need to know what it wants. If you just have a ghost who doesn't have any intention, who doesn't want something, it's not necessarily going to be that scary. So why is it haunting? Does it want to right a wrong? Does it want revenge? Is it just really angry because it's dead and you're alive? Is it malevolent? Does it wish you ill? Now, I'm talking about the kind of ghost stories that frighten people, because that's the kind that I really enjoy. And that's my aim when I write ghost stories. I want to scare the hell out of you. So I tend to think, well, I want my ghost to be malevolent. But when I come to talk about my favourite books, I'll mention a story in which there is a non-malevolent ghost and it's still scary. That's very difficult to do. But I think it's also important, and this I'm going to say again and again about writing ghost stories, is that we don't learn too much about the ghost. It should remain in the shadows. You as the writer need to know who it was. But it's a delicate thing how much you reveal to the reader. For both my ghost stories, I wrote a little biography of the ghost. I mean, I always do this for my characters anyway. I just jot down what they look like, what their childhood was like, what they like and dislike, that sort of thing. And I did the same for the ghost. I mean, the ghost when it was alive, as it were. But I started to feel sorry for it in both cases because, you know, you're writing about a person, in my case. And so you start to feel sorry for it. That's because it was a full biography. It was a full page of notes, not all of which got into the book, because the last thing I wanted to do was the reader to feel sorry for the ghost. but you need to know who your ghost is. So that's kind of the first principle, I think, of writing a ghost story. And the second thing then is the nature of the haunting throughout the story. And I'm talking about a sort of relatively full-length ghost story, but, you know, the same thing applies to short stories, which happen to be ghost stories. How does the haunting start? In other words, how does your hero or heroine, your protagonist, start to think there's something up? And how does the haunting proceed? I'm talking about ghost stories. I'm not talking about horror. I'm not talking about blood and guts spattered all over the first page of your book. So in the kind of ghost story that I like and that I try to write, the haunting is progressive. It starts with just a feeling of unease, maybe, or a shiver down your back, something, you know, the hero thinks maybe there's something behind him or whatever. Or just even the use of language can cause shivers. And then we gradually start to feel there's something wrong. And suggestion, I find, is always something seen out of the corner of your eye, is always scarier than full on actually seeing the monster. I think we've got some pictures somewhere of a really scary monster. There we go, full face. Rawr. I think that's quite funny, actually. I mean, this is from quite a good Hollywood film, but, you know, they just try to put everything together, and that's scary. Actually, it was a good Hollywood film before the monster appeared, because, you know, it was things just sort of suggested, sounds, smells, perhaps even, feelings, not necessarily in your face. And the last sort of aspect, which I think is really important in ghost stories and is really fun when you're writing them, is the setting. You want an atmospheric setting. And there's a reason for this, because you want to make the reader feel that the story is really happening. You know, this could happen. So if you set it in a haunted house, make it a real haunted house. Don't just think in terms of, a few spooky curtains and things, you know. What colour is the sofa and that sort of thing? Make it real and make it atmospheric. I mean, I've chosen both with my ghost stories to be in remote places. One is the high Arctic, the other is the Himalayas. But I hope they're atmospheric settings, and I've tried to make them as real as possible, because if you believe in the setting and you believe in the people who are inhabiting that setting, then with luck, if you've done your work properly, the reader will believe in the ghost. Just to finish up, people often ask me, you know, do you believe in ghosts? Because I write ghost stories, or I've written two. And the answer is, no, I don't believe that they exist, but I'm open to the evidence. And there is some weird things have happened to some pretty level-headed people. And it's that gap between belief and knowledge, that I think that's where ghosts lie, in the shadows. That's where they exist. So that's just a little bit about writing ghost stories. You know, get to know your ghost. Is it malevolent? What does it want? When you have the haunting, sort of make it progressive and keep it in the shadows. Don't show too much of your monster, and try to keep the setting atmospheric and above all real. But good luck, because, as I said, I think it's certainly one of the hardest kinds of novels I've ever written. But then to show you how it's really done, I'm going to mention two of my favourite volumes of ghost stories. The first is the collected ghost stories of M.R. James. Now, many of you may know these. They are the classic by what I think is the greatest writer of ghost stories in the English language. He was an Edwardian antiquary. He was a very, very clever academic. He knew all about medieval manuscripts. I would just say read them slowly. They're written in quite a fusty Edwardian style, but they pack a punch if you read every word and read them in the right atmosphere at night. And if you haven't read them, I really envy you. If you read only one of them, I'd go for Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, which I think is one of the most perfect ghost stories in the English language. So good luck with that one. The second book was written for slightly younger readers, but it could be read by anyone of any age. It's Mr. Corbett's Ghost by Leon Garfield. This was written when I was a child, and I read it when I was a child. It's a short book, very short. It's only about 70 pages long, but it's beautifully written. It's set in the 18th century, and it's, as I said in when I was talking about ghosts, it's not really a malevolent ghost, but it's still very eerie. I won't say any more than that about it, except to say that it's set in the 18th century, and it's a young apprentice who's out on a very he's out on a very windy, cold New Year's Eve, and he really doesn't like his boss, and he takes a decision that he's going to regret. So that's all I'll say, but it's an excellent book. So that's just a little bit about ghosts. But now we come to the readers' questions, which is going to take a while. And as I said, you've sent in quite a lot of them, so I'm going to have a sort of add-on session. But I don't want to stop you from still asking questions. So please, just a reminder, if you'd like to ask questions, go to my website and click on Ask, and that will show you how to do it. You won't get an instantaneous reply from me because I don't email back replies. I'm not on email, but we will collect them and answer the questions. And you'll also be able to check out that competition to celebrate the publication of Thin Air paperback. But anyway, let's get started. And the first, well, it's not really a question. It's a lovely long comment, which I'm not going to read the whole thing, but on the theme of ghosts, it's from Phil, who's obviously quite a tough guy, because he works as a dog handler and he's essentially spends his nights sneaking around in the dark searching for people up to no good. So he's tough. And I managed to scare him. So I'm absolutely delighted because he was reading Thin Air. And I love the way you finish, Phil, by saying, after finishing Thin Air at 1 a.m. this morning on the airfield, instead of driving to the next patrol route as usual, I found myself heading for the nearest 24-hour petrol station for some artificial light, human contact, and vile coffee from a machine. So thank you once again. And I suppose congratulations for successfully frightening me. Thank you, Phil. And yes, that is what I wanted to do. So I'm glad I frightened you. Here we've got Matthew, who's also finished my ghost stories and enjoyed them. Thank you very much. And I have a great interest, he says, in this type of storytelling. And I'd like to just ask if you could offer any kind of advice to someone who's currently on their first attempt at writing a novel. Well, I've talked about structuring a ghost story, but just to broaden that out, and I wanted to say, because in my last Michelle Paver Live, I think I answered a question from Lorraine, who I think her daughter liked writing, and I sort of rushed that answer a little bit. So this is a little bit more of a full answer on just a few ideas on writing a novel, or indeed writing generally. I think I mentioned before, keep a notebook with you. Here, whoops, I've just dropped one, but this is my waterproof one, which travels with me on my research trips, but I always carry a waterproof with me, a notebook with me. But I have a sort of prettier one which lives by my bed, because that's a great place to sort of, you think of ideas and you jot them down. I'm not going to, there's no time to go into sort of how you structure a novel and things, but just to say that a little bit of planning doesn't go amiss. I mean, not everybody plans books that they write. I do. I like to at least be clear on who my main character is, what they want. Are they going to get it? Because that gives me the sort of pull of the novel. How you write is up to you, whether you write straight on screen or I tend to write in longhand first of all. But what I would say, a hint, Matthew, is when you have written something, whether it's a chapter or a section, put it away for a bit. Don't keep rereading it. Put it away and go on to put it in a drawer or something and go on to the next section. And then when you come back to it, maybe after a few weeks or a couple of months ideally, you'll see it afresh, and that is so valuable. So try to remember to do that. It's lovely, I know, rereading stuff you've written, because it's a lot easier than writing new stuff, but it's much better to keep going. And then if you've had a break from it, you can see what's wrong with it. Which brings me to the most important thing about writing. If you do remember one thing from this, just remember to rewrite. Cut out the boring bits, make it tighter, make it easier to read. Try reading it under your breath, and you will see if you've just made great long sentences that are a bit clunky. I'm just going to reach down and get my, I don't keep my manuscripts, but that's all that's left of Ghost Hunter manuscript. You can see it's a complete mess. It's got a coffee stain on it. That's from it was called chapter 29, and it became chapter 33 in the book. And then it got I typed it up, and it got more scribbles on it. So, it goes on. So you can do anything. You can change whatever you like. So rewriting is really important. And also, this is obvious, but read a lot. Read how other people write novels and stories. Good writers, bad writers. Sometimes reading something really clunky can be quite encouraging, and also it can show you, through other people's mistakes, how to do it a bit better. So I could go on, but those are just a few pointers. I hope that helps, Matthew, and good luck with trying to write. It doesn't get any easier, I have to say, but you just get a little bit quicker at seeing where you're going wrong, perhaps. Now, we've got Maxwell. Again, this is a long one, which I won't read completely, but it's a lovely, lovely comment. Just explaining that it was he was supposed to be doing a summer book report, and his mother tried to force him to read something political. You were 13 and you found Wolf Brother. So excellent. I'm so glad. It doesn't preclude you reading political books, but and it's also very sweet of you that you say you admire my work ethic. So thank you for that. And you hope to be a writer one day. I hope so. I hope this has fired your imagination, Maxwell. So good luck with that. Oh, and we've got a lovely illustrated one from Sebastian now. Just wanted to thank you for writing these amazing books. I'm from Sweden. I'm a big fan of the wild and the nature. And when I was in 3rd grade and found Wolf Brother on the library shelf and started to read it, I fell in love. Well, that's brilliant, Sebastian. I'm so pleased. I do love the covers of the Swedish books, Chronicles. I think they're really in your face. They're lovely. But thank you, Sebastian. And now Megan has a question, which is an interesting one. This is about, if or when Dark Matter gets filmed, will all the dogs from the book be included? Well, I really hope so. They might just have sort of walk-on parts, because obviously most of the dogs don't feature large in the book itself. The film, I've seen the script for the film. It's beautiful. It's really, really good. I'm delighted, and it's not often that I say that about adaptations. And so fingers crossed that Dark Matter will actually get made. I'm pretty certain Isaac will be getting a starring role in the film, because he's the most important dog. I hope that allays some of your concerns, Megan. But of course, I'm not the one with control of the book, of the film. So final decision made by the producers. Now we have a question from Turkey. Greetings. I hope I get your name right. Is it Gizem? Anyway, hello, Gizem. I discovered you in Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, and they were my favourite. Fantastic English, Gizem, apart from anything else. I'm interested with wildlife, primitivism, etc. I can't even say it, primitivism. So I like your books very much. I just saw your book Thin Air, and I was excited so much because I'm interested in mountaineering at the same time. Please, I want to read Thin Air in Turkish. If this is possible, I'll be very happy. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to dash your hopes, Gizem. It isn't translated into Turkish, at least not yet. And as far as I know, there are no plans. But your English seems pretty good, so you might want to have a go at reading it in English. Sorry about that. It's not in my control. It's the publishers, I'm afraid, on that one. Now we've got a question from Shannon. Dear Michelle, I came to see you at your book event at Halifax Central Library, West Yorkshire, some years back. Yeah, that is a few years ago, actually. Shannon, you signed a copy of your book for me. Very nice to meet you. And you say very nice things, Shannon. I'm not going to read them out too much about how I strive in my career and that sort of thing. Oh, and yes, you recently made a friend who's also a fan of my works, but he hasn't been able to come to my event. So you were just wondering if I can get something signed specifically for him. And I'm sorry, I'm taking this question, Shannon, because I do get a lot of these requests, and I'm afraid I can't. I'm sure you'll understand that it would sort of open the floodgates if I said, yes, I can start sending out signed things. It just, I get them from all over the world, and I wouldn't get any writing done. In a similar way, Aubrey Cripps has written very nicely. You teach, and which I love comments from teachers, because not least because my younger sister's a brilliant teacher, and you've chosen Wolf Brother to immerse your students in the Native American culture, which is interesting because, yes, I did use quite a lot of elements from particularly the Pacific Northwest First Nations in Wolf Brother. And you say your story, albeit fiction, allows my students to understand the complex spiritual nature of the first Americans, which is quite a task to explain. Yes, I can imagine it would be, and an even harder task for them to research. I agree with that. I found it quite hard. I love that your book does this naturally with a character they can love and follow. Thank you so much for that, Aubrey. I'm afraid I can't, again, I hope you understand, send out 25 books to your classroom library. Again, I'm glad you're listening to the audio, but I get a lot of requests, and it would keep us busy and stop me writing. But thanks for that comment. Now we have something from Luca, who is another keen writer. It's great to hear from writers. And Luca Boffa, a religious boy from Italy. Again, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. My dream is to write a biblical historical setting novel for children and teenagers. What do you think of my idea? Well, if it's your dream, I'm guessing that you really love that period and you really want to write it. So I would say go for it, because if you love it, there's a chance that other people might as well. Certainly, that was my feeling when I started thinking about Wolf Brother. I wasn't aware of any books set in the Stone Age, but I loved that period. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later. So in the same way, good on you. Good for you. You found a setting that you really like. I suspect you've got a good idea so go for it, Luca, and good luck. Now, Alia, I hope I pronounced your name right. Hello, I thought your books are brilliant. I really enjoyed reading them because of the way they're written. How were you inspired to write them? Well, Alia, now you say you're 9, and Wolf Brother goes back to when I was about your age, when I was 9. That was when I was inspired. I didn't know I was going to end up writing books about wolves when I was in my 40s. But I loved the Stone Age at that time. My parents had a big book of very dramatic pictures of people living in the Stone Age, and I thought that looked great because they didn't go to school, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to hunt with a bow and arrow, and it just looked fun. And the other thing I loved when I was your age were wolves. I read all about them. I pestered my parents for a wolf. They wouldn't give me one because I lived in South London. They were quite right. They gave me a spaniel instead, but he became a wolf in my imagination. He went for walks. So that's partly where Wolf Brother came about. I also had a rather scary encounter with a bear in Southern California when I was grown up, and that also went into the mix. So all those things sort of stirred around in my brain, and much, much later, when I was trying to think what to write, they came together, and that was where Wolf Brother came from. So it's very mysterious business, writing. But thank you for that question, Alia. And now we have one from France, Émilie, writing in extremely good English. I'm sorry, I'm not going to attempt to say anything in French because my French isn't as good as your English. But I discover you through your books, The Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, and I definitely love them. So next, you're reading Gods and Warriors. That's my Bronze Age series. And of course, I love them too. Well, I'm glad about that, Emily. But there is a problem. I read the first and second volumes in French, but then she wants to read Eye of the Falcon. That's the third book. Book 4 is The Crocodile Tomb. Book 5 is Warrior Bronze. And they don't exist in French. Why aren't my books translated? Good question. The intention was to have them all of them translated into French. You would have to ask my publishers in France, Hachette, for that, because they've changed their mind. I was told a few years ago that they decided to wait until the series was finished, excuse me, and then they would publish the last 3 volumes. I don't think that's happened yet. I'm really sorry, Emily, but it's not in my control. So you might want to phone up Hachette in Paris and ask them if they've got any plans, but I'm afraid I don't have any control over that. I'd like to know the answer to that too, but there we go. Now, Zoe, here we are. I'm one of your biggest fans and always will be. Thank you, Zoe. You started to read my books when you were 9, got Wolf Brother as a present because you love wolves. Gripped by my first sentence. I'm glad about that. Since then, you've read and bought all of my books. But Wolf Brother would always be my favorite. But you have a great idea. So this is out of the ordinary. I'm going to, would it be possible if you could do a book or a series where Hylas, Pyrrha, Havoc and Echo, those are all the characters in The Gods and Warriors, meet up with Torak, Ren, Wolf, Rip, Rek and Darkfur. So those are all the characters in Chronicles of Ancient. So we've got Bronze Age and we've got the Stone Age coming together and having a battle against another rising enemy. Well, it would be amazing. We would be getting into the realms of science fiction there, I think, Zoe, because you've got the Stone Age, you've got the Bronze Age. It's about 3,000 years apart. I think it's fair to say that I won't be doing that. But nice idea, Zoe. You're thinking outside the box. And I'm afraid, yes, you asked me to email you. And as many of you know, I don't have email. I know I am talking to you on the internet through the auspices of my wonderful agent, but I don't have the email up because otherwise I wouldn't get you writing done. Now we come to 2 great questions from, I hope I pronounced your name, Elias from Sweden, I think it is. Yeah. And great questions. You read Chronicles when you were a child. I think you're grown up now from the sound of it. And you're Swedish. You know the taste of cloudberries, the joy of eating dried reindeer, the soft feel of reindeer pelt. Brilliant English apart from anything else. It makes the story so real to me. I'm really glad. And you got 3, because I did a lot of research in Sweden. You got 3 questions. Is there a sort of written list or similar of facts about Torak's world? Things like how many clans there are, how many people there are in each clan, that sort of thing. You've read somewhere that there's no bear clan because the world spirit forbade it, but that's not in the books. You're right. I mean, I think I mentioned that in one event or something, and that's true, that there is no bear clan for that reason. The answer to that question is no. There is a sort of list in my working files, but you're not going to get a look at them because I keep scribbling all over them and not going back and correcting mistakes and things like that. I've never yet produced a sort of handbook to Torak's world. Sometimes I've talked to my publishers about it, but the problem at the moment is that I'm always writing something, a book. So I don't have time. I'm not ruling that out in the future. So thank you for jogging my memory. It's quite a nice idea, but there isn't some sort of definitive list. And there's another reason for that. I like to keep it a little fuzzy at the edges so that maybe I can add another clan if I ever go back to that world, something like that. I don't really want to be too definitive. I'll be talking about sequels maybe in a later broadcast, but that's why there isn't a definitive handbook. Second is a really interesting question. I am transgender, a trans man, born a girl, but now a man. And I know in many indigenous and ancient cultures, trans people were seen as holy, destined to be great mages and shamans. How would the people of the Chronicles view people like me? And yes, I did come across this in my research. You're absolutely right. Obviously, we don't know how Stone Age people viewed other people because they didn't write things down. But as you know, when I did the research for Chronicles, I looked at traditional cultures and anthropology. And from that, I took my lead. And as you rightly say, many traditional cultures view either transgender or homosexual people or people who are a little different as special. And many of them become mages and shamans. And in the world of Chronicles, which was getting back to your question, I wanted to reflect this in Ghost Hunter, but so much was happening in that book that it would have been artificial, so I didn't get the chance. But in the world of Chronicles, it very much reflects this world, the real world, in that some of the clans, like some of the deep forest clans, which are pretty fundamentalist, radical religious clans, are idiots and would victimize certainly homosexuals and that sort of thing. Because some of those deep forest clans, I think you get the image that they are idiots. But most of the open forest clans, particularly the Raven clan led by Finkedin, yes, very much would regard them. They would be shamans and special and possibly leaders. And in the same way as the Otter clan has, the twins were often regarded as special, and so became mages. So yeah, great question. And this is finally, yes, how would the clans like, and I have been asked this before, so I'm glad you asked this, how would the clans like Rowan, Oak, Kelp pray before a hunt? Raven clan, of course, say, may the guardian fly with you. Seal clan, may the guardian swim with you. So how would Rowan, Oak, Kelp? Well, what they tend to say is, may the guardian hunt with you. So that's the same for Viper clan, because you don't say, may the guardian slither with you. Just sound ridiculous. And yeah, what would you say for Kelp? May the guardian grow very tall with you. So all of those, they've just solved it by saying, may the guardian hunt with you. Which, if you're in any doubt, that's what you say. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because it was something I've known from the start, but I don't think it's ever arisen in the books. Some of these things don't. And finally, thank you for sending us the most gorgeous picture, Elias. This is, look at this, people. This is a white elk or a moose. That would be, in America, you'd call it a moose. It's not an albino. You can tell because its eye is not pink. It's what they call leucistic, as Elias rightly says. And it's just white. Its pigment is white, but it's still got pigment in its eye. And that's in the same way as the white raven arc in Ghost Hunter. It's got dark eyes, and I've never seen a white elk. And I was a little bit conflicted when I saw this, Elias, because I thought I could have used that in Chronicles. But it's a beautiful, beautiful picture. And yes, it would definitely have had significance, magical significance to the people of Torek's time. I don't think they would have shot it somehow. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for great questions. We're getting toward a couple more questions, I think. Molly, I think you are the mother of, well, yes, you are a mother. You've just started to listen to the first audiobook, which I think is Chronicles, yes. And on the back it says that the novel takes place in the Stone Age 6,000 years ago. Correct. And Molly says this is very inaccurate, as the Stone Age ended about 10,000 years ago. It lasted millions of years and came to an end about 8,000 years BC. Molly, I don't know where you heard that, but no, it didn't. It does depend on where in the world you are, so that may be what you're thinking, but Torek's world is set, and I did do quite a lot of research on this, I'm sure you'll understand. Torek's world is set in northwest Scandinavia during what they call the late Mesolithic. That's the middle Stone Age, so it's not even the latest Stone Age. That lasted in that area between about sort of 7,000 to 5,200 before present. If you want to go into BC, you'd say that's about 5,000 BC to about 3,000 BC. The Bronze Age in Northern Europe then kicked in round about 6,000 before present, which is about 4,000 BC. I could go into the names of the cultures I've used, the archaeological cultures, the Congo-Mosa and the Etobola people in that part of Scandinavia. That's going into too much detail, but basically, no, the Stone Age in that part of the world didn't end about 8,000 years BC. And the other point to make is that it's different in different parts of the world. I mean, there are tribes today which are still living in the Stone Age, but very definitely in Europe, the Stone Age went on for rather longer. I mean, farming and, the Bronze Age started off quite early quite recently nearer the time that you're thinking in the Far East. But, we're talking about Northern Europe, and no, I did get my dates right on that one. But so you can listen to those books with, if you still want to, with your children, knowing that I got my dates right. Quite a few archaeologists agree with me on that one. But thank you for writing in, because you should feel free to point that sort of thing out if you think I've done something wrong. Let's move on to Findlay now. Oh, yes, who was sort of thinking aloud. I think you're only 10, Findlay, and you've just started reading Wolf Brother. First of all, you started, and it's nothing like anything I've read before. I'm really enjoying it, but I don't understand who Tall Talus is. I've read chapter 5, and I'm still confused. Have I missed something? And then a little bit later, we get something else from Findlay saying, think I may have the answer. Is Tall Talus Torak? Yes, you got it, Findlay. You got there. So well done. Just goes to show, if you just keep reading, you sometimes find the answer is sort of buried a little bit later on. So well done. And I think, yes, we're just about on the last question now. And this is from Ben. I just finished the Chronicles of Ancient Darkness series. I cried at the end. Oh, Ben, I'm sorry, but I'm kind of glad as well, because that's what I wanted. And I feel as if I've lost a part of me. I know that feeling. I used to get that, and I still do. And I just end up starting to reread the books then. I hope that you can get another idea for Torak's world and carry on the story. I also have a question. What was Far's name? I'm not going to tell you. There are a few things in that book. I'm sorry, actually, this isn't the last question. There's one more question to go. There are a few things in those books that no one's ever going to find out. No one's ever going to find out what Far's name was, or the joke that Torak was telling Far just before the bear attacked. I just like to keep a few things mysterious, because we never find out everything in this life. So why should we in those books? But nice try, Ben. And finally, this is the final one now. We've got a question from Carolina. You've read your Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, and I adore it. I have two questions. What happened with Finkedin after the last book? And is there or will there be any other book which takes place in that world? I'm not going to tell you about Finkedin. And I think the whole question of sequels and things, I have dealt with that before, but I'll have a few more words to say on that, but we are running out of time. So I think, Carolina, I'm going to have to leave that one. I'm sorry, I'm using you as a bit of a teaser for these sort of additional broadcasts that I'll do in a couple of weeks' time to deal with all the other questions that you've asked that I haven't had time to come around to. They don't all concern Chronicles of Ancient Darkness, but a lot of them do. And that'll be in a couple of weeks' time. So check out the website for that. As I said at the beginning, if you want to ask a question, click on michellepaver.com and go to ask. You'll be able to ask one. And don't forget that for those of you who are technically minded and can actually remix video, which I wouldn't begin to do, remember there are fabulous prizes to be won if you click on my website and look for the competition for recutting the prank video. All of that is to celebrate the Thin Air paperback on the 5th of October, a month's time. So, well, that's all we've got time for, actually. And next month, thank you for listening. And next month, I will be answering more questions, because there will doubtless be more questions even after the add-on broadcast. And my special subject of the month will be writing about ancient times. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.